Thank you, everyone. I am absolutely inspired by what I've heard over the last couple of days. Coming back, visiting Almere and seeing what was achieved there, and then following it up this year, listening to all the presenters and exhibitors, what's been done in this wonderful place and in South Korea more widely has been incredibly impressive. And I think the takeaway for me is that each country, each city has its own unique approach in dealing with this problem. And in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'd like to show you the approach that Australia has taken in relation to green cities. I'm going to talk about the Green Cities Frontiers Fund, which is a research and development fund which is operated in Australia. I'll talk about Australian cities. Australian cities are similar but unique because of their geography and where we've come from. I'll talk about Greenlife Industry Australia and our initial research fund called Vision 2020, which stands for 20% more green space by 2020, and how that gained momentum into the Green Cities Frontiers Fund. Next slide. Yep. Okay. This is where we sort of started, and I was interested in your approach on going back about 20 years, about where we've come from. This is not unfamiliar to everybody. I transitioned from the army in the early 2000s, and my wife said to me when we bought a horticultural business, she said, "Don't stick your hand up for anything." Right? You've done that all your life. Don't stick your hand up for anything. Just concentrate on the business. Well, I let it go about 4 or 5 years, and I could see a lot of the work that was being done about climate change early on. And I didn't think that our industry was really responding to it. They were sort of getting it, but not doing it. Anyway, so I wrote a paper on the implications of climate change for the nursery industry, the horticultural industry in Australia. And I stuck it under the door of all the board directors at our national conference. And of course, I got told then to put up or shut up. So get involved. So that's the sort of where we were sort of sitting at. We were just coming through quite literally 8 or 9 years of severe drought. I spoke about that yesterday. Our water storages were a terrible way. We'd just had huge forest fires. This is the early implications of climate change, killing hundreds of people and a tremendous loss of infrastructure. So that was the climate where we started to have a conversation, and it was about all of these sorts of things. So if I was to move on then, around 2013 or so, there was a conversation about how we could refocus our research and development to start to address some of these issues. And the idea was, rather than just saying that all these things are important to government and whatever, we took a different approach, slightly different approach, and established a social movement. And the idea was to use things like the power of plants, but also talk about the power of people and the power of people and plants together. And to get people thinking about all of these issues, because on the back of 8 or 9 years of drought and the early implications of climate change, this seemed like a good thing to do. 2020 vision was a resounding success. Probably its only shortfall was it should have been out to 2020, 30 or 40 or something like that. It ran its course quite quickly, within 7 years, but we'd established the background to a social movement. The idea was to influence the influencers, right? The people that are involved in policy development, the planners, the government, the landscape architects, the urban planners, etc. But build that around a social movement and get people, the public, interested in what we were doing. It was incredibly successful. It won a an award as the best sustainable cities project in Australia. And I think it was actually put up for a UN award, but I couldn't find the actual reference to that, but it sounds good anyway. We had a problem with our peak industry body as well. There was zero focus really on advocacy of these sorts of things. So we changed our peak industry body and gave it a slightly different focus. And that's the vision of it today. A heavy emphasis on advocacy. We're responsible for a nursery levy. A nursery levy, for every plastic pot that is sold in our industry, the government collects 5% of the value of that plastic pot, puts that into a fund, and that is matched for research and development dollar for dollar by the government, federal government. So it's quite unique. It's worth a couple of $1 million a year to us in research and development. We spend a lot of that on biosecurity, but also a heavy emphasis on marketing. So I mentioned that 2020 vision. Got tremendous momentum. It has now migrated into a program called Greener Spaces, Better Places, and I encourage you all, if you want to look that up on the web, there's a lot of good information on that. Lots of ambassadors and advocates that post information on social media about the benefits of greening cities. Next slide. So, out of that and the profile that was gained by that, Horticulture Innovation Australia, which is our government body which collects our levies in all the different commodity groups of horticulture, vegetables, strawberries, mushrooms, etc., decided that they would have a cross-industry fund established, so all levies are contributing to it, because they could see that it was so important that green cities were represented. It was so important for horticulture in Australia. Horti Innovation is a not-for-profit research and development and marketing company for Australia's $13.2 billion horti industry. And it developed the Frontier Strategic Partnership Initiative to better equip Australian hort to remain innovative and sustainable. So this is the purpose and vision of the Green Frontiers Fund. And it's really about driving demand for increased urban green space so that we enhance our global reputation as a country committed to urban greening. It is essentially looking at where are the gaps in our knowledge base, both our knowledge base from an international perspective, what is our gaps in our knowledge from a unique Australian perspective, and focusing the R&D in those areas. Those themes are summarised there, but they're fairly wide because we're looking at the impacts on the communities in the cities. Investment so far, about $14 million in research and development on those themes, and I can go into that in a little bit more detail as we go. So there are our stakeholders. We're really drawing the expertise that we have from around the country, thank you, into our expert advisory panel. I sit on it, but we have representatives from government, technical research and development communities, universities, etc., which sit on our expert advisory panel. Investment priorities are focused on personal health, wellbeing, and social cohesion, climatic resilience of urban environments, and environmental and economic sustainability. And I must say that the work that's being done there is applicable right around, and we'd be happy to share the research in the wider context with our colleagues. We have to do this and still build the public understanding of what we're doing at the same time. Changing government policy and perception is important. That tends to be slow. It gets accelerated if the public are clamouring for this sort of thing. Personal health, wellbeing and social cohesion, there's been a lot of work done on that. There's some examples of how we do that. Guides on, for example, quick reference guides on the benefits of specific plants in green spaces, what works well in particular contexts. Some of our early work was giving local government authorities and cities the tools to do this sort of work. So we actually held workshops on how to do an urban forest strategy. Right? Brought them in, gave them all the tools, all the templates and whatever, and now most of the major cities and a lot of the regional cities now have urban forest strategies, and that's being used for them to value their green space and develop. We understand this quite well. We keep hammering this in our social messages. Climatic resilience, a lot of work's been done in Australia, but drawing on also the international expertise. I think the best practice guide on green infrastructure for disaster preparedness and mitigation got additional impetus as a consequence of the floods that we had in the last couple of years. Some examples of that. I'm moving along here quickly because I want to allow some time for questions. Not enough work is being done on air quality, and we're going to do some more research on that. Clearly, we've done a fair bit of work on treating and using stormwater in our urban areas, but what is the correct mix of urban vegetation to reduce air pollution and increase air quality? We've got to monitor and evaluate this, and we're developing some tools on how we should do that. And what is the impact? What is the impact on our economic? How we can reduce the costs of natural disaster? What is the social impact on improving physical and mental health? And what is the environmental impact of these measures? And that's what our outcome. Livable, resilient and green urban spaces for Australian communities supported by a prepared horticulture sector that can support all that. Okay, I invite questions on our particular Australian perspective, but it's quite similar to the work that is being done in Europe, in the European context. But I think the main difference is we're working very much on what is creating a social movement and getting the public behind it and promoting those decisions. So thank you very much.